Jacob Zuma now finds himself standing at the edge of a political disaster so severe that even his most determined critics might hesitate to wish it upon him. What makes this moment especially tragic is that the forces pushing him toward this downfall are not his long-standing political opponents, not the relentless scrutiny of the media, nor the sharp assessments of analysts. Instead, the pressure is coming from those who once believed in him most deeply, those who trusted him, relied on him, and elevated him to the status of a political savior. In communities such as KwaMashu, emotions that had been quietly building beneath the surface have finally erupted. Anger, disappointment, and regret now dominate the voices of MK Party supporters who once hoped that their vote would mark a turning point in South Africa's political history. Rather than pride, there is now embarrassment, and instead of hope, there is a profound sense of betrayal that goes far beyond the ordinary frustrations of electoral politics. What was intended to be a calm and constructive community engagement in Ward 54 of KwaMashu, meant to celebrate democratic participation and the accountability of leadership, became something entirely different. It exposed a divide so deep and painful that it left the room heavy with silence. During that meeting, one citizen stood up and delivered words that sounded less like a political critique and more like a eulogy for the MK Party's reputation. His voice carried anger, shame, and suffering as he openly declared that the nation should forgive them for wasting their votes on what he described as a mess that had turned them into a laughingstock. These were not the rehearsed lines of a political enemy nor the rhetoric of a rival party. They were the raw expressions of a broken supporter, someone who had once embraced the vision Zuma preached and believed it offered a genuine alternative. When the MK Party burst onto the political scene in 2024, it did so with drama, passion, and a promise to restore dignity to a country weary of broken assurances. For many South Africans, this movement felt like a new dawn, a long-awaited force that could challenge the ANC for its failures while also confronting the DA for what many perceived as its distance from ordinary people. The MK Party's near 14% share of the popular vote shocked political analysts and upended the established order almost overnight. Zuma's movement was no longer dismissed as a fringe rebellion, it became a serious parliamentary player. Across the country, people spoke of a new chapter, a moment when long-ignored communities might finally have their voices heard and their grievances addressed. Yet the excitement faded quickly, replaced by a troubling sense of déjà vu. The slogans and catchphrases may have been new, but the patterns that followed felt painfully familiar. Early fault lines soon became visible. The MK Party's decision to boycott the inaugural sitting of the National Assembly was initially praised by some supporters as a bold and principled stand. However, whatever symbolic value that gesture held was rapidly overshadowed by internal chaos. Reports of infighting began to dominate headlines, with disputes over parliamentary representation, leadership struggles, and contradictory statements from party spokespersons sowing confusion. Those who had hoped for decisive leadership and a clear plan for transformation found themselves watching a political organization consumed by its own internal battles. Supporters who believed in systemic change wanted discipline, direction, and conviction from their leaders. Instead, they witnessed confusion, drama, and an unsettling implication that rebellion alone could substitute for the hard work of governance. For years, Zuma's appeal had been built on an emotional connection with marginalized communities. He was portrayed as a fearless crusader against political elites, a leader unafraid to challenge entrenched power. That image had sustained loyalty even during his most controversial moments. But now, amid the disorder engulfing the MK Party, that carefully cultivated bond appears to be unraveling. Rather than advancing coherent policy agendas, senior figures within the MK Party have been drawn into public mudslinging. Court decisions have been questioned, dismissed, or outright ignored, further eroding the party's credibility. Leaked audio recordings, poorly managed press conferences, and visible internal conflicts have drowned out any message of unity. Throughout all of this, Zuma himself has remained largely silent. At first, That silence was interpreted by some as a calculated form of pragmatism, perhaps a strategy to let tensions cool. Increasingly, however, it is being seen as something far more damaging, a lack of solidarity with the very movement he inspired. For many supporters, the minimum expectation was that Zuma would step forward to guide the party through the storm he helped create. His absence from the front lines has deepened the sense of abandonment. Political analyst Lon Lam has warned that the anger emerging from places like KwaMashu is far more significant than it may initially appear. Political loyalty, he argues, can be a powerful force capable of sustaining leaders through prolonged periods of controversy. However, it is also fragile. When loyal supporters feel betrayed or ignored, that same fire can quickly turn destructive. The MK party's decline, in this view, stems from its inability to regenerate itself creatively. Mobilizing masses through passionate rhetoric is relatively easy, but building and managing a disciplined, effective political organization that delivers tangible results requires a different set of skills and sustained effort. For many South Africans, the disappointment surrounding the MK party is deeply personal. People supported the movement not out of blind loyalty, but out of genuine hope. They believed MK would champion economic justice, accelerate land transformation, strengthen social protection, and drive meaningful change. They expected Zuma to amplify the voices of communities that had long been ignored. Yet with each passing week marked by inaction and internal conflict, it feels to many as though those promises have been broken. Instead of progress, they see leaders publicly shaming one another, while the real issues facing communities remain unaddressed. In places like KwaMashu, residents are now questioning whether their votes were not only wasted, but exploited. The questions emerging from this disillusionment are the kind no political leader wants to hear from their own base. Where is Zuma while his movement appears to be disintegrating? Where is the plan to restore unity at a moment when it is most urgently needed? Why are internal factions growing stronger while community outreach and service delivery continue to weaken? How have the initial guarantees that fueled so much hope unraveled so quickly? These questions are no longer whispered behind closed doors. They are being voiced openly at rallies, funerals, taxi ranks, and public gatherings across the country. What makes the situation even more alarming is that the unrest is no longer confined to parliament or isolated communities. Discontent has spread into other areas once considered strongholds of MK support, regions that had pledged unwavering allegiance. The turmoil has filtered down into branch structures, youth formations, and local committees. When instability reaches this grassroots level, the foundations of any political movement are at risk of collapse. Insiders suggest that Zuma is aware of the growing anger and is hoping that internal conflicts will resolve themselves naturally over time. Yet hope alone offers little comfort to supporters who feel ignored and disillusioned. In moments of crisis, silence is not a neutral stance, it becomes a statement in itself. When a political party appears to be on the verge of collapse, and when its supporters are crying out for leadership, something has to give. What is unfolding is not merely political drama designed to capture headlines. It is a movement unraveling at the seams. The implications extend beyond the MK party itself. A fragmented political landscape can destabilize governance, foster rival alliances, and distract from urgent national challenges such as unemployment, poverty, and rising crime. South Africans are watching closely, not only to see what becomes of Zuma and the MK party, but because they recognize in this crisis a reflection of broader failures within the country's political culture. Many citizens are exhausted by political organizations that promise transformation yet deliver only internal disputes. They are disenchanted with leaders who speak the language of revolution but lack the capacity to maintain internal cohesion and discipline. Whether the MK party survives as a meaningful political force or fades into historical memory will depend on actions taken, or avoided, in the near future. If Zuma continues to retreat into silence while factions wage internal wars, the movement risks collapsing entirely. Increasingly, South Africans are questioning whether Zuma still possesses the energy, resolve, and willingness to lead, and whether he can once again become the unifying figure he once was. For many, the fear is that he no longer can. As things stand, the future of the MK party remains clouded with uncertainty. The anger rising in places like KwaMashu serves as a stark warning not only to Zuma, but to all political leaders. South Africans are hungry for more than powerful speeches and emotional appeals. They are demanding accountability, delivery, and leadership rooted in action rather than rhetoric. How much of this message Zuma is prepared to absorb, and whether he is willing to respond decisively, remains to be seen.